it might be an occasion to talk about the Black Panther Party, its legacy, how its legacy is now rejuvenating, so to speak, among others, and what this means for what I call cultural justice. You know, cultural justice is, we're talking a lot about social justice now. We're talking a lot about economic justice and things of that nature, but we don't talk a lot about cultural justice. And so I'd like to, open the floor up about that later on. But I thought that I would start out in reading a bit about from my book. Is, as we can see, that's a little reverse right there. Life After Life, a story of rage and redemption. Uh, the the movie Judas and the Black Messiah touched a nerve with me because I joined the party in early 1971, a little more than a year after the assassination of Fred Hampton. And I was literally swept off the tennis courts. I wanted to be another Arthur Ashe, and I was literally swept off the tennis courts by my sister and another group of high schoolers who said, come and join us. And we're going to Winston-Salem. We're going to join the Black Panther Party. And when I went there, at that time, they had a copy of the film, The Murder of Fred Hampton. So Fred Hampton spoke to me uh, as a martyr, and there was a poster that read, he came from the mountaintop down to the valley. And I felt like what that meant, or I was told what that meant, is that Fred Hampton, and this didn't come out in the movie, but Fred Hampton came from a middle class Black family. And most of the members of the Panther Party were from the poor strata of the Black community, and they were struggling for liberation, and they felt like Fred uh, sacrificed a great deal. And I felt, coming from a middle class family myself, that I could do no less. So I'd like to read from chapter 3, Panther in Training, which talks about me going down to Winston-Salem. And I might mention this, I was watching Judas and the Black Messiah, and I was watching the Panthers and how they were, and I said to myself, I said, those were some brave brothers and sisters back then, and I kind of got swept up and had forgotten that, this was a bit before my time, but that I had been involved in a similar period, though it was not as much or with as much confrontation with the police. I stepped from the bus after the 2-hour trip from Danville, the smell of diesel fumes and exhaust filling my nostrils, the garment bag with the shotgun slung over my shoulder. After retrieving my small suitcase, I emerged from the bus station overhang into the sun. No one was there to meet me. The Panthers' phone line was still disconnected, so they did not know the time of my arrival. And in any case, they had felt that the police might monitor any call and hence might be there to intercept me, a teenager with a concealed weapon. As trepidation tried to peel away at my resolve, I embarked on the 2-mile trek to the Panther apartment with a sense of mission born of adolescent idealism. My walk from the bus station took me through downtown Winston-Salem, where I looked up at the tall buildings like a tourist, passing from part of the industrial section with the gigantic smokestack of the R.J. Reynolds tobacco factory. My now politicized mind began to think of the modern-day slaves who toiled there, processing the legal drug of tobacco. It was Sunday and the streets were mostly deserted, which suited my idea of myself as a lone soldier, a spy or intelligence agent of some sort, resigned to an isolated life of secrecy for the cause. But I could not help but wonder and fear if the FBI had me under surveillance. Now, as an aside, I found out later on from unredacted portions of FBI reports that they indeed had me under surveillance at this particular time, and were saying in their reports that the Panthers had gone to Virginia, the Panthers in Winston-Salem had gone to Virginia and recruited the smartest student that they could find to come down and infiltrate the school system in Winston-Salem and to infiltrate Winston-Salem State. And actually, the FBI visiting Winston-Salem State a year later blocked me from getting a scholarship to go to that school. So instead, I went out to Oakland and began writing for the Black Panther Party newspaper. The 15 members crowded into the front room of the 3-room apartment they called a shotgun shack. I took my place in the corner, sitting on the rough hardwood floor, since the few places on the old couch and all of the worn vinyl and metal kitchen chairs were taken. And I decided there was a dark humor involved here in light of the shotguns in evidence at every window. So the Panther Party, even at that time, they had become less confrontational with police, but they still had guns all around in case of an attack by police. And we stood guard all night because in Winston-Salem, the previous headquarters had been actually firebombed by agents of the police or the Ku Klux Klan. We could never figure out really. The coordinator of the chapter, Larry Little, was taking the group through the catechism of the 10-point platform and program, which all new members were required to learn and be able to recite. Point number 1, he demanded of Papa Doc, the stuttering, semi-literate brother, called upon first with the easiest question in order to spare him the embarrassment of not knowing the more difficult points. We want for freedom, Doc said. We want the power to determine the destiny of our Black community. Then he beamed with relief and pride. Point number 2, Judge, said Larry. We want housing fit for the shelter of human beings, Judge said. He was a large man who wore thick, very dark shades because he was half blind, though he was a gifted artist in charge of putting out posters and leaflets as head of the Ministry of Information for the chapter. We want an education which teaches us the true nature of this decadent American society and teaches us our true role in society. I looked around at the others in the room. A few of them had given up promising academic careers, but most had diverted their lives from a basic struggle to survive to embrace a new kind of vow of poverty in order to serve the people, body and soul, as the Panther motto put it. So these young people, I was young myself, but these people inspired me. And I think that in light of viewing Judas and the Black Messiah, I looked at it both as a writer, as an ex-Panther, but I tried to look at it just as someone who didn't know the history of the party and just how young people especially would feel in watching a movie such as this. And the biggest thing that I came away from it was this sense of the courage that they had. So the question is, does this courage inspire? How does this courage, or how might this courage relate to inspiring those who partake in the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, and looking back on the situation in terms of the cultural justice, the story of the Panther Party um, has been repressed by history. Many people still think of the party as being equated as the FBI agent said in the film, as being equated with the Ku Klux Klan, and nothing could be further from the truth. So, I'm looking at the film as an aspect of cultural justice, perhaps even cultural revenge, because the assassination of Fred Hampton, as was said by Congressman Bobby Rush, who was actually the head of the Chicago chapter at the time, this was the greatest political assassination, state-sanctioned assassination in our nation's history, and no one knew about it. I'm not going to say no one knew about it, but no one knew about it widely. So in terms of looking at the concept of cultural justice, we wonder, how can we bring about a sense of justice? How can this film perhaps help lead toward a greater sense of cultural justice, of getting these stories out? Now, I have worked with some people in Charlottesville and Richmond, and we are founding the Civic and Cultural Justice Initiative, in order to bring about the telling of the stories to augment this sense of cultural justice that is beginning to take over a bit in the country. And part of this has been inspired by the story of my uncle, Gregory Swanson, whose story had not been told for many years, in terms of being the first Black student to desegregate an all-white university in the South, and being the first Black student at UVA Law and at UVA. And I happened to go to UVA to speak, and discovered that no one there knew, virtually no one there knew or had ever heard of Gregory Swanson. And so after a little more digging, we began to find out that that Thurgood Marshall was his attorney, his lead attorney, along with Oliver Hill and Spotswood Robinson. Now, I knew a little bit about Oliver Hill and Spotswood Robinson, but I began to find out, and had for a while been working on trying to bring about some awareness of the Virginia Civil Rights Monument in Capitol Square. Few people know about that monument. I didn't give this to Meldon to put up, so I'll just sort of put it up here. But this is a pamphlet that shows the monument. Oh, yes, thank you. That shows the monument in Capitol Square, a beautiful monument. And it shows Barbara Johns with students who led the Prince Edward County school strike of 1951, which was also the period when Gregory was in law school, and when he was still associated with Oliver Hill and Spotswood Robinson. So all of this is of a piece of this history that was forgotten. But now, as we know, the legislature, I think, is about to vote, or has voted on, replacing the statue of Robert E. Lee with a statue of Barbara Johns. At the same time, you have a monument already here in Richmond, and I would wager to bet that 90% of the people in Richmond don't even know that that monument exists, and maybe 98% of the people in Virginia, and it's supposed to be a monument to the struggle for civil rights in Virginia, you know. So this is an example, or these two situations are examples of the need for cultural justice in you know, in our state and in our nation. You take, for instance, the story of, and here we have a photo of Gregory Swanson on the low wall outside of the courthouse. It's now the library in the city of Charlottesville, but it was the federal courthouse and post office in 1950. So there he is in the center. To his right is Spotswood Robinson. To his left is to his left is Oliver Hill, and to Hill's left is Thurgood Marshall. You know, so these are people who who are virtually forgotten by history, except of course not Thurgood Marshall, but a lot of people until the movie Marshall came out did not know of Marshall's work as a civil rights attorney. You know, he was in fact called Mr. Civil Rights, traveled throughout the South, uh, trying hundreds of cases. Oliver Hill and his law office was perhaps the most active law office in the South and the most active civil rights law office in the 50s and 60s, other than the NAACP Legal Defense Fund in New York. So these are stories that, you know, if you have cultural justice, the flip side of cultural justice is cultural crime. You know, so to a certain extent, or at least cultural injustice, and in some cases, cultural crimes of cover-ups. At that time in 1950, there might as well have been a sign up on the walls of newsrooms that said no photos of Negroes allowed. You know, I mean, they actually didn't put a photo of a Black man or woman in the newspaper as a matter of course. It just didn't happen. You know, they didn't even put them in as they later started to do when they committed crimes or were accused of crimes. So the question is, how do we begin sort of a movement toward cultural justice and telling these stories in a more widespread type of manner? You know, how do we go about doing that? And so this is one of the aims of CCJI, Civic and Cultural Justice Initiative. And so, you know, when as we're about to begin to sort of open up and make this perhaps more of a dialogue and invite questions in, you know, I'd like to know what you think might be done in order to do that, and what you think of Judas and the Black Messiah as being an harbinger of more advanced methodologies and getting these stories told, as opposed to, say, the stories that have been told in the past, and some of the fluff that has been told, and some of the nonsense that has been told. And I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody because I might end up working with them as a writer, but I can think of shows like Scandal and How to Get Away with Murder and Power, and what's that other one? Empire. You know what I mean? We've got to get away from the type of stuff that I don't know. There's a market for them. I'm not saying that they're bad shows, but I'm not saying that they're good art as well. So I'd like to, if any of you have any questions that you'd like to pose about that. But in any case, getting back to Judas and the Black Messiah, I have talked to members of the party, former members of the party, to see what they thought about the film and its depiction, and whether or not it brings out aspects of the legacy of the party. Um, and most of them feel like it's very realistic. Everybody has trouble with certain parts of the story, which they felt that may have been over dramatized or might not have been particularly realistic. But most people have said that it's the most realistic depiction of that period of the Panther Party, but it does not talk about the fact that when Huey Newton was released from jail, he felt like the party had become more or less, um, he called it not a cult, but cultish in its glamorization of the use of the gun. The gun was mainly a tool of liberation, but it felt like, it glamorized this whole concept of we're on the verge of revolution, and we felt like we were on the verge of revolution. But Newton began to teach that revolution was a process, and he took the party in the direction of working within the system and of putting away the gun. But the party is still remembered because of the gun, because of the style, because of the leather coats. They were wearing in leather coats and berets much of the time in the film. And I'm not sure, maybe they were doing that in Chicago, but that was not the case in most chapters and branches, because most comrades did not have the money to be buying leather coats at that time, and to walk around with the berets sometimes called attention to who you were when you were supposed to be mixing in with the masses and working with them. So so that's sort of, I think that the aspect of the film coming out as it has now, it shows what can be done when there is an all-Black production team that is not necessarily beholden to, I won't say the white power structure and their media, but the media is sort of controlled by, or has been controlled in many instances, by people who don't want to do anything to rock the boat or to tell uncomfortable stories. And in this case, you had the producer, Charles King, who was able to finance half of the 26 million that it took to make the film. And then you had a director who was unwavering in his vision, Shaka King, who, in my opinion, brought off the film very well. So, I'd like to hear from others about how you feel about the film. I don't know if this is at the point, Meldon, if you could come in and help with any questions, or if you have anyone who would like to ask a question or give a comment at this
Yes,
particular time, I would welcome it.
yes. There is a question in the chat, and it is, good evening. I have not had the opportunity to see the movie. What aspects of the history are brought to life in this film as opposed to Van Peebles' treatment in Panther?
Van Peebles' treatment was totally, I won't say totally fictionalized, but it was the fictionalized treatment. This story is based upon true events, I think is the way they put it nowadays, in order to fictionalize some things, but have most of it based upon the truth. From all I've read and from what I know, this movie sticks with the basic facts, pretty much so, particularly when it comes to the actual killing and the raid upon Fred Hampton. Some people have taken exception to the fact that the movie focuses too much on the William O'Neill character. And it felt like the movie should have focused on Fred Hampton. I think that as as something of a filmmaker and a writer, I can understand showing both sides and showing that side, because when you think about it, the film is about the assassination of Fred Hampton, and the film took the tact of sort of copying after the film, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Ford, and so it sort of showed the movement by someone who infiltrated the movement and was able to see the inside of it coming from outside, and also we know his evil intent. Some critics have criticized the film for saying that the film makes William O'Neill more interesting, or his story more interesting than the story of Fred Hampton, which of course is a fascinating story. And I think that the story of Fred Hampton certainly still needs to be told, but by and large, there were also aspects of the film that other Panthers who were there have taken exception to, which is the shootout with Spurgeon Jake Winters, there's a shootout in the film. I don't want to give any spoilers, in which he actually shoots someone at point blank range. They said that didn't happen like that. But basically, they had Fred Hampton Jr. and Fred Hampton's wife, Mama, I think it's Deborah Johnson was her name at that time. Her characters, more or less, they were consultants to the film. And I have been told that at times they held the filmmakers' feet to the fire and made them keep it, at least 60-65% real, but based in reality. The Van Peebles film, I thought, was a good film for its time, but it wasn't, the main character wasn't based upon a true life Panther. And I think it has sort of grown stale over time because of it, but it was an important film at that time.
Feel free to put your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand. There's another question here. As you look back and reflect on the film and other popular images of the Panthers today, what in your mind remains the most misunderstood notion about the Panthers and their mission?
Well, I think the most misunderstood aspect is the fact that the party was founded for self-defense, but that violent confrontation with the police and the rhetoric of off the pig and of violent and of you know, if you say off the pig, it sounds like you're saying attack the pig, you know what I mean? And then even the use of the naming of police officers and calling them pigs. I think that what the Panther Party was trying to do was to imbue courage into Black people, because you know, if you look at the Black young people now, they seem much more unafraid than many of the Black community of that time. You know, uh, Black people were cowed, many of them. Many of them weren't, but many of them were. You know, you don't want to do anything to make the white man mad, you know what I mean? And that sort of thing. And it was, but at the same time, there was a new resurgence of anger that was taking place and evincing itself in rioting in many cases. So I think that the main misconception is that and I think that Judas and the Black Messiah plays into this to a certain extent, because it shows some community work, but it didn't show as much work in the community as I would have like to have seen. For instance, it didn't show the primacy of the Black Panther Party newspaper in doing community work. And they had one brief scene in which someone was selling papers um, uh, in the background, and Fred was handing out leaflets. But the Black Panther Party newspaper was central to the education work. It was used to educate party members as well as the public, and it was the financial basis that kept the party going. And I felt like that was missing. And also, people don't understand the Marxist um, ideology and philosophy that party members had. So it seems like the party, you know, we're classified as having been a Black power group rather than international proletarian revolutionary group, so to speak, you know. So I think that that needs to be understood, because I don't think people, you know, there's a resurgence of and a more or less an upsurge in Black pride, and talking about Black people have been slighted and we need this and we need that. But it doesn't talk about the fact that that even as far as Black men and women being killed by the police, white men and women are being killed by the police as well. You know, maybe not to the extent, but the police have too much power. You don't hear anything. The Panthers call for community control of police, you know, but that's, you're going to take it a little too far when you said defund the police. I understand what they're saying, but you know, it's like, I think that that's the major misconception, and the fact that we uh, oh, I'm reading I'm reading a question, but I'm sorry. But I think that that's the main thing, is that the ideological nature of the party, the intellectual nature of the party, and the contradiction between the police that was heightened. I think those are the major misconceptions. I think my friend Nathan McCall, the esteemed author of Makes Me Wanna Holler, just put up a question to everyone. And I don't know if the question is to everyone or for everyone to see, or the question is to me. Have I become more radical uh, uh, or more conservative? conservative is not a word that I would use to describe Evans Hopkins, you know, but I am perhaps less radical because I see revolution as a process, and in this period of time, you know, we have to work more towards working within the system, because now when we first, the party started in 1971 and 72, started talking about working within the system, and Bobby Seale even ran for mayor of Oakland, and I was part of that campaign in 1972, 73. So I think that I would have to say I have become I can't use the word liberal because I don't see myself as a liberal, you know, but as a solid progressive, and looking at some of the things that young people have done and are doing, say with Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black Lives. My heart is totally there, and I see a lot of anger that is sort of being dissipated now, and there's a chance to work within the system now that we have a president that causes less confrontation. But we have to, you know, we have to temper our anger with reason, and that's where I'm coming from now.
Okay, there are a number of questions in the chat. Another one is, I'm curious about the political, social education that may have been required to become a Panther and how it compares to standard US public education.
Well, the second point in the platform program of the Panther Party is we want an education that teaches us the true nature of this decadent American society. I think that the political education of a Panther, you know, we read Chairman Mao's Red Book, we read Lenin, we read all of these philosophical books that broke down the way, you know, the way knowledge is gathered and assimilated. You know, we read one of the books we studied intently was Maurice Cornforth's Materialism and the Dialectical Method. And so education in America is sort of based upon idealistic notions that are not firmly wed to reality. When you take, for instance, what happened at the Capitol and what's happening with this resurgence of white nationalism and the QAnon and all of this, people in America feel like they can believe in anything. It does not have to be fact-based. It does not have to be truth-based. You know, they can just believe in anything you want to believe in. Well, the basis of this comes from the late 19th century and early 20th century, where you had this evangelical movement that felt that they could do anything that they wanted with certain notions of Christianity. You had the Mormons to come out to say that, you know, they had their own messiahs. You even had you even had you know, bless them for what they did in many ways, because were very important for the Black consciousness of America. But even the Black Muslims So the nation, the original Nation of Islam, these things weren't particularly based in a scientific method. So when you have people who come up and just mix stuff up out of whole cloth and say that Democrats are a bunch of baby-eating pedophiles, and they say, oh yeah, they must be. That's true. It's got to be because it's on the internet. You know what I mean? So so education today, uh, it needs reforming. But what I find is missing in education today, there's nothing to inspire the young people. I think this is an opportunity because of what has gone on with the COVID crisis to begin to put in uh, things that can inspire our youth from studying people in our historical backgrounds, the heroes of our history. You know, right now, uh, history, for instance, is studied as a bunch of events. We don't try to understand the nature of the hero. In literature, we don't read literature in order to understand what heroism is all about. That there is no rootedness to understanding what morality is all about, how morality has developed in society in order to propagate the species. Um, but it's innate within our species. Um, um, I'm sorry, I just missed that last question, but I shouldn't be trying to read them. But there are studies of even babies that show that babies relate to fairness, and they do things to punish those that they feel are unfair. So it's this basic feeling toward justice, uh, which is within human nature. But you've got the spread now. Economic disparity is greater than it's ever been in the United States and all over the world, and I think it's leading us to catastrophe.
Here's another question. Could you talk about aspects of Hampton's vision and legacy, and how those aspects have influenced or affected you most profoundly at that early time in your life and now?
Well, they talk, for instance, in the movie, and many people have written about it, is they've talked about the Rainbow Coalition and how Hampton was the first to talk about developing the Rainbow Coalition. Well, what Fred Hampton was doing, uh, he was probably the foremost progenitor of that in the party, being that the Chicago chapter was one of the largest. But these are things and concepts that were developed by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale in working with, particularly, they never worked with white, well, they worked with white radicals in Berkeley a great deal. That was sort of like a black and white coalition, but they also worked with the Latinos or the Latinx community in California. So Fred was just taking the things that he had learned from party doctrine and adapting them to Chicago, but he did it with a lot more flair. And unfortunately, he was killed so young, we never got any writings from him, and his speeches were wonderful, but but even the line where he said, I want to live, I'm going to live for the people, I'm going to die for the people. Well, to die for the people was the that was part of Huey Newton's speech, and the title of one of his books, you know. But Fred had that rhetorical flair, which I'm said, you know, he used to practice, and many people feel like, um, you know, when they killed Fred Hampton, that they sort of presaged the demise of the party, because they felt like he was the one to continue to lead the party onward. You know, Huey Newton was in jail at that time, and Bobby Seale was in jail also. Um, so, you know, I was inspired by him at that time, but I can't say that. That, you know, his thought has inspired me more than others, because his thought, to a certain extent, was a derivation of the thought of others.
Okay, here's another question. You speak of studying Mao and Lenin as a Panther. How closely, if at all, was the party allied with communism?
Well, you know, the party, Newton used to say that we are not a Marxist party, because Marx himself said that he was not a Marxist. But we more or less avowed socialist doctrine to a certain extent, and more so than communist doctrine. So we didn't ally ourselves with the Communist Party. We felt like the Communist Party was uh, infiltrated is not the word, but they had been compromised to a certain extent in America. And that word is still sort of compromised, and they're always trying to call us socialists, or progressive politicians call them socialists. And but I think we need to start dealing with uh, the semantics of political struggle. And I think that, you know, it would be good if there might be a move towards social democracy, you know, rather than to call it straight up socialism. So, but at the same time, you know, when you look at the history of the Communist Party, that's another history that hasn't gotten any cultural justice, you know, because it was those working with the Communist Party, like Paul Robeson, and the Communist Party embraced him. They were the ones working with the Scottsboro Boys, and with the Civil Rights Congress. That's another name of a group that is lost to history, who worked with the Martinsville Seven. There's another need for cultural justice. You know, the story of the Martinsville Seven, the seven Black men who were executed for the rape of a white woman in 1951. A case in which my uncle Gregory Swanson was involved with, um, as well as Oliver Hill. So I am not a communist.
Okay, from your point of view, what's the difference between liberal and progressive?
Well, liberalism in the party, liberalism was thought of to be going for anything, you know what I mean, or just being open to anything. A progressive is working toward progress. A liberal is sort of just going along and thinking things are all right. You know, it, you know, so I can't call myself a liberal, but I am a progressive. However, many liberals are progressives, so it's sort of a semantical thing, and I'm not sure I can fully answer that question satisfactorily.
Okay. Do you agree with this statement that our young people are inspired by the challenge of climate science? And how do you think that is going to impact their lives?
I was thinking about this recently, that I haven't paid enough attention to the effect of climate science and how young people at least can see this as affecting their future. I think that the powers that be, most of them are older people, older men, and older white men especially, but they're figuring they won't be around when it gets that bad. The problem with a lot of the green movement is that they sometimes can be anti-development, you know. And then if you have a green movement in America, sometimes, you know, what about in the developing world? The green movement in the developing world, they need as much technology and energy capacity as they can get. So I'm not fully developed in my thinking on that in order to have um, a public line, as they say. But we in the party, we used to say have a party line and a public line. So I think that you know, you say, for instance, you look at wind technology. You know, is wind technology really what we need? You know, and we totally disparage atomic energy. You know, and whereas atomic energy may be one of the most important things for the future and the development of humankind. I say it may be because I'm not totally up on the development of it, you know, but because of accidents at Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, it's sort of been disparaged. But you know, some of the power that lights the room that I'm in today comes from atomic energy. So I think it's something that we need to look at. You know, what does it? Bob Marley says, "Have no fear of atomic energy, because none of them can stop at the time." Yeah.
Question, are you working on any more stories about your time as a Black Panther?
Um, I am adapting Life After Life. By the way, any of you who are interested in books, you can email me at evanshopkins@yahoo.com, and I'll be happy to get a copy to you for costs and postage. But I'm adapting Life After Life for a mini series, and in discussion with a producer and director and people in LA about adapting it. So if it's adapted for the screen, then and I'm also looking at reissuing the book. So I'm, you know, I'm open to, it's kind of hard to relive some of that period. I've been through worse than I went through in the Panther Party, but the story can be inspirational to people. It is certainly timely right now, and so I'm looking at reissuing Life After Life and paying a bit more attention to the party because it's a story that needs to be told.
And in view of the time, this will probably be our last question. In retrospect, do you have any regrets about your participation as a Panther?
Good question. Good question. Um, it's interesting because I was very angry. And in fact, the Panther Party probably made me less angry or helped me to develop avenues for my anger, so to speak. So do I have regrets? I have a lot of regrets, there are certain things that happened when I was in the party. The party began to sort of unravel while I was in Oakland. Um, the period I was in Winston-Salem, I look back upon as some of the best years in my life. But it did give me a consciousness that has stayed with me and given me hope and courage. But the anger, when my anger became unharnessed, that's when I became a brigand of sorts and ended up in the criminal justice system. So so yes, I have regrets, and if I had to do it all over again, uh, I would do it differently. There were mistakes that the party made. There were mistakes that I made in thinking. So so yes, there are a lot of regret, you know what I mean? But at the same time, a lot of pride as well, because watching Judas and the Black Messiah, it reminded me that now that the story is getting out, the story can help others and can help inspire people. So, and that's what I was doing. I was writing for the Black Panther Party newspaper, and so and it made me the writer I am today. And so I'll have less regrets when I get my hands on this million.
Thank you so much, Evans. Please, audience, get his book. It's a tremendous book. The library has more than one copy. So I think you can get it through curbside pickup. And we're so happy to have this discussion. Feel free to unmute yourselves and hang out for a bit. And Evans, we can't thank you enough.
Okay, and please email me if you would at Evans Hopkins, EVANS, don't forget the S, HOPKINS at yahoo.com if you're interested in the book or have any questions. I think I saw one question that came from R. Rosewood that I'll be happy to answer. And, so thank you so much. And thank you all. It's good to see some friends I haven't seen in a long time. And thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate it. All power to
Thank
the
you,
people.
sweetheart. This is your wife.
All right. Thank you, darling.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. This is Sheila Hopkins.
Hi,
Nice to
Sheila.
meet you.
Thank you for joining. Hey. Y'all have a good night.
All right.
There's some more questions in the chat that just appeared after 7. So I don't know if Anna, are you still here?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Anna.
Hi, Mel.
Hi, Anna. Long time no see.
I know. I've been on back-to-back Zoom calls since about 4 o'clock today. So
Wow.
no, it was really good to hear. I realized that in all these years, I really haven't actually been able to attend many of your programs. So it was really good to hear you talk about this in the context of the film. and the work that you've been doing. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just a shout out to my own book club. The law library is starting the Oliver W. Hill Book Club on March the 8th. And we're going to be discussing Jailed for Freedom. It's an eyewitness account of the jailing of the suffragists. And our speaker who will be leading the discussion is the author of the introduction, the introduction to the 100th anniversary edition. A woman of color, a suffragist historian. So please join us.
All right, thank you. And thanks to everyone. Please send me some info on that. Oliver Hill is one of the subjects of my new book. And I want to thank, again, Charles Jones. I see Susan Starseed, Anna, and those whom I don't know, please feel free to email me, and Nathan McCall, and my uncle Carol Swanson, my cousin Adrian Swanson, and my cousin Manifa Love, and everybody, and of course my wife Sheila Hopkins. So thanks so much.
Evans, I just want to, I'm going to call my son out because he's on this too, which I really wanted him to do, because he's been really, ever since the rebellions and the rebellions, resistance, the protests last summer, he really got curious about the Panthers and about their program, not the, glamorization of the sort of outward trappings, but the real, the real aspect. And so he posted a really good question asking about the education of the Panthers versus the education of the public school system. So yeah, that's Timir Gore. That's my son.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All
So
right. Well, tell him
wanted you to meet.
Yeah, tell him to email me, and
Just listening.
All right.
Yeah. The email address is in the chat, evanshopkins@yahoo.com. Don't forget the S.
All right.